Okay, yesterday was a hard day. Learning about Elizabeth Eckford and the other members of the Little Rock Nine was emotionally impactful in ways that I did not anticipate. I don't know how much more of this level of emotion and heaviness I can handle, but we are now on our way to Memphis, Tennessee, and we're going to visit the spot where Martin Luther King lost his life, or had his life taken. And I expect more heaviness today, so here we go. We are psychotherapists, not filmmakers, but we're about to take you on a life-changing adventure. This Black History Month, join me, Elliot Connie, and my best friend, Dr. Adam Frower, as we explore some of the most defining moments in our country's history through the lens of a solution-focused expert. The next city on this trip was Memphis, Tennessee. And Memphis, Tennessee was kind of funny because like so much of this was unplanned, unscripted, to just see what we could learn by being in the areas of where these things happen. And Memphis, Tennessee is the spot where Dr. Martin Luther King lost his life. It's where he was shot.
This is the Lorraine Motel. It was originally built in 1925, but was known by a different name. In 1945, Walter Bailey purchased the property and renamed it after his wife, Lori. During a time of segregation, this motel was a motel that specifically catered to a Black population. This was one of the only upscale lodging areas in the Memphis area at the time that catered to a Black clientele. This is the site where Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. However, this was not the first assassination attempt on Martin Luther King's life. James Earl Ray was later arrested on June 8th, 1968, which was a few months after Martin Luther King was assassinated. He was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. James Earl Ray pled guilty and was sentenced to 99 years in the Tennessee State Penitentiary. He was in prison until his death in 1998.
And we got to the hotel.
The Lorraine Hotel?
The Lorraine Hotel. Was it motel even, actually? Anyway, we got there, and it's an interesting place because it's kind of like a time capsule almost. Like they left that block, and you can't like walk up to the hotel. They've turned most of the hotel into a museum that you go through and you learn about civil rights. And then you see the room. They have 2 rooms preserved. And there are 2 rooms Martin Luther King stayed in. One room he stayed in the night, the room he was, walking out of when he was shot. We got there to discover the hotel is not open on Mondays. The museum is not open on Mondays. And we tried to record. I remember it was so difficult because there was a guy that was like using a water pressure gun. Power washer to clean the side of the building. And which is not conducive to trying to record. So we're trying to record, and somebody comes out, like security comes out and says, you can't record here. So we end up recording on the street. And I was like, man, I'm not coming all this way, not at least trying. So the museum was closed to the public, but like the people who worked there were there. And I was able to talk my way in and got somebody to let me have like a little private view of what this place was. Adam and his wife, Becca, had to wait outside because they couldn't take everybody, but they took me in. And it was just, Memphis was amazing because we got to kind of be in hallowed ground. And of all the places that we visited on this trip, the MLK places were the ones that were like time capsuled. It was interesting, like interesting things we learned. In Tulsa, things were annihilated. And in Little Rock, Arkansas, things were like documented, like life had gone on, but like we're gonna like commemorate this, or commemorate be the right word, but like put a pin on this. Mm-hmm. But there was something about the MLK things on the trip where it was kind of like time capsuled.
On that Saturday, or rather that Sunday morning before day, my baby was taken from his uncle's home and my aunt's home. And I found out about it 9:30 Sunday morning. I was in bed. I got up, called my mother, when I got the news, because I had every decision I had ever made or every crack that I had ever been in, it took her to get me out of it.
Emmett Till was a boy who was lynched in Mississippi in 1955. At the age of 14, he died on August 28, 1955, after being accused of offending a white woman in her family's grocery store. This event took place in Money, Mississippi. However, Emmett Till was not from Money, Mississippi. He was actually from Chicago, Illinois, and was visiting his family members, his extended family members, in Mississippi for the summer. At the time, the white woman who he was accused of offending was a woman by the name of Carolyn Bryant, and she was 21 years old at the time, and her husband was the owner of the grocery store. As we visited this site, we learned that Emmett and his cousin went to the grocery store, and Emmett, being unfamiliar with the customs in the South at the time, when he went to pay for his goods, he directly put his money into Caroline's hand, which was not appropriate in the South at the time. Instead, the black community was supposed to put the money on the counter, and then the white person would pick up the money, therefore avoiding any physical touch between the two. Emmett didn't know that, and his cousin got nervous and left the property. Emmett came out a few minutes later, and his cousin said, "What did you do? Why did you do that?" And Emmett was kind of confused, and at that point, Carolyn, being somewhat flustered by the encounter, came out and followed the boys. At that point, Emmett, who was known to be a rambunctious, kind of wild-hearted kid, whistled at Carolyn, again, not really understanding the implications of that in the South. We aren't sure if he whistled at her in a flirting way or just whistled and she interpreted it as something inappropriate. But Emmett's cousin got quite upset and started running, and Emmett ran after him. Later that night, Caroline Brandt's husband, his name was Roy, and his half-brother, J.W. Millam, they came to Emmett's great-uncle's home, and they started banging on the door, and they said, "Where is he? Let him out." At that point, they actually went into his home and abducted Emmett. They took him away from his uncle's home and beat him and mutilated him significantly. It wasn't until 3 days later that Emmett Till's body was discovered and retrieved from the river. His mother did something quite brave and quite self-sacrificing at the time. She insisted that they have an open casket funeral for Emmett Till so that the world could see what had happened to her son.
Okay, so our journey has now taken us to Glen Rose, Mississippi, and there is nothing out here, but one of the things that's already impactful is finding there's a plaque to note where Emmett Till was found and removed from the Tallahatchie River, and we can't find it. It's nowhere online. Driving around Glen Rose, Mississippi, which you can probably see from the landscape, there's nothing here. But one of the reasons we can't find it is because they don't publish where it is, because vandals have shot it. and they filled it with so many bullet holes that eventually whoever was in charge of this site put a 500-pound bulletproof memorial there, and we're gonna find this memorial. So I told you I was gonna show you where we were, and this is the spot where Emmett Till's body was pulled from the water. And I don't know what to say about it. Like, I don't know what to say right now, but I want you to see it. And the reason why I want you to see it is because, when I first started this journey, I'm not sure I knew what it was about, but I knew I had to do it. And I talked to Adam about it, and it was very clear he knew he had to do it. But I think now, part of the task is to show what hate can do, so that we can be reminded that hate shouldn't be tolerated, accepted, or enabled, or excused. And we have to remember what happened in places like this. A 14-year-old boy was running, whistled while he was running, and we literally just talked to people who were there. We literally just talked to people who were here in Glendora at that time, and heard the story from first-hand accounts. And because he whistled while he was running, a couple days later, he was pulled out of this water, badly mutilated, barely looking human. I spent most of my career talking about hope and inspiration, and I think that's important. Like, we have to know hope and inspiration so we can have a view for the future. But I also think we have to remember hurt, pain, and tragedy, so that we remember why hope and a focus on the future is important, because we don't ever want to come back to a place where a 14-year-old boy is removed from his community, dragged in. We drove miles into the middle of nowhere. He was removed from his community, beaten, shot, tortured, threw in the back of a pickup truck, driven those same miles we just drove, because of hate. And we got to remember not to allow that. It was a place that, even though this horrific event happened 70 plus years before we visited it, you could still feel the ripple effect of that community trauma. Mm-hmm. It was, and it's scary. There's a bunch of signs that say, this is the home where the people suspected of killing him was, and it was not it's a big pile of wood now. And then there were all these things, these purple signs, and we were trying to find where the riverbed was, where he was pulled out of water, and the closer you got to it, the more bullet holes were in the signs about the Emmett Till murder. And when we did find which was not easy to find, when we did find the riverbed, there was a bulletproof sign about what had happened here. And it was scary. I remember thinking, here I am, a black man with a white man and his wife, who's also white, and we're alone at this riverbed, and we're just kind of talking about what happened here 70 plus years ago. And I remember thinking, if a vehicle pulled in behind us, I would be terrified. Mm-hmm. Because there was violent evidence that hate is still present. There's bullet holes in the signs all throughout Glendora, Mississippi. And we met the mayor of Glendora, Mississippi, who was the son of the black man that was accused of helping the white mob find Emmett Till. And he still has fear in his eyes talking about it. He still is moved to tears, and he shook with anxiety as he was answering our questions, and I'll never forget that. Mm-hmm. But what does it do to a community when one of its members of the community is plucked out and so abused, terrorized, and murdered, and then the people who did that were not held accountable? What does that do to a community?
Well, it did not much to this community except for the fear they've harbored of that incident. And that is where we are now. The fear.
Still, however many years later.
It's still, however many years later, not to stigma to tie to me or the community that I'm living in. I don't talk about it. I don't say anything about it. It's fearful.
Right.
It's fearful to even talk about it out there.
Some of the questions that we asked were about how those incidences impacted what was going on today. And he got, like you mentioned, scared, and in essence was saying, I can't talk about it because I'm a descendant of those people, and the people who murdered Emmett Till, their descendants are still here. And you could tell that the race relations, he said, in essence, I'm afraid to even talk about the incident because of what could still happen today. And I think it's the most prevalent I could see ongoing overt racism happening. It was, and again, you mentioned the bullet holes in the signs, and as we were kind of trying to find the place, we had to go down this dirt road for a really, really long time and had serious conversations around, like, if another car comes behind us, what does that mean? And two, is there anything we could do to keep ourselves safe?
Right.
And determining, in essence, there wasn't. Like, we were at the mercy of fate at that point. And I think that's one of the very few times in my life where I have had to be scared because of racism. It wasn't racism necessarily toward me, but the fact that you and I were together could have obviously put you in danger, but could have put me and my wife in danger. And that's very, very rarely do I have to feel afraid because of racism, but that was one of those moments.
Right.
And I think the other thing that stands out to me that's connected to that is you would call your family and tell them kind of where we were on their journey, and your aunt regularly saying, keep two white people around because she was scared. What I was experiencing in one moment, she was experiencing for you for the entire time we were gone.
Right.
And so I think that that's when fear of racism came into my life.